Board Game Reader presents Dead of Winter, The Long Night. What's new? If you have played the first Dead of Winter and just want to review what is new in Dead of Winter, The Long Night, see the Long Night Rules section on page 16. This is an example main objective card. It's got a name, how to set up, and a goal, as well as the time of how long the game should last. A short game is 45 to 90 minutes, a medium game is 90 minutes to 120 minutes, and a long game is 120 to 210 minutes. Note, cards in the Dead of Winter The Long Night are marked with a moon icon in the lower right corner to help distinguish them from cards included in other Dead of Winter sets. This is an example survivor card. They all have unique names, occupation, influence value, attack value, search value, and an ability that works at a particular location. There are 7 types of item cards: weapon, fuel, education, food, medicine, tool, and survivor. They all have a description and a location from where it originally came from, such as the police station. The player reference sheet is very important. It helps keep track of your turn and the round. Remember to place your group leader on the left of the player reference sheet. Any followers should be placed below. Use the dice sections to keep track of how much you've used. There are 6 different types of cards used in Dead of Winter: main objective cards, secret objective cards, survivor cards, item cards, crisis cards, and crossroads cards. A crisis card appears in every round. To prevent the crisis, there is a condition you must fulfill. If you fail to reach this objective, you'll often lose 1 morale or otherwise stated. If you're fortunate to have enough resources, there's also optional objectives too. The first player token. This token identifies who's the first player. The first player goes first in a round and breaks all ties. Barricade tokens. One side is a normal barricade and the other is an explosive trap. Action dice. These are rolled each round and used to perform certain types of actions. Wound tokens. These are double-sided. One side is a regular wound and the other side is a frostbite wound. Noise tokens. These are added to locations to represent noise that was made there. Food tokens. These are added to and removed from the food supply by various game effects. Starvation tokens. These are added to the food supply when there is not enough food to feed the colony. Despair tokens. Some card effects apply despair tokens to survivors. Despair tokens are wounds that cannot be removed except by effects that explicitly remove despair tokens. Advancement tokens. These tokens are added to improvement cards to mark progress towards completing construction of that improvement. Survivor and zombie standees. These represent the survivors and zombies on the game board. Insert the bottom of the standees into the plastic standee stands. The exposure die. This is rolled by various game effects to determine if a survivor has been wounded, frostbitten, or bitten. The helpless survivor tokens. These represent helpless members of the community. One side represents a normal helpless survivor, and the other represents an unruly helpless survivor. The game board. The game board is made up of 10 different locations, including the colony board and 9 location cards. This page in the rulebook contains heavy diagram use and is fairly self-explanatory, so you may find it more helpful to read this in your own time. Game setup. Number 1. Place the colony board in the center of the play area and place the 6 location cards around it. Number 2. Each player collects a player reference sheet. Number 3. Players may decide which standard main objective they would like to play or pick one randomly. Place the main objective in its space on a colony board and set up the game board according to the main objective setup instructions. See Adding Zombies on page 13 for more details on adding zombies to colony entrance spaces. Number 4. Shuffle the non-betrayal secret objective cards and set aside 2 face down per player. Return the rest of the non-betrayal cards to the game box. Shuffle the betrayal secret objective cards and add one of them face down to the non-betrayal cards that were set aside. Return the remainder of the betrayal secret objective cards to the game box. Shuffle all the set aside cards together and deal 1 to each player. Return the remaining secret objective cards to the game box without looking at them. A player cannot reveal his secret objective card to other players. Number 5. Shuffle the crisis cards and place a deck on its space on the colony board. Number 6. Shuffle and make decks of the survivor, exiled objective, and crossroad cards and place the decks off to the side of the play area. Number 7. Shuffle all of the starter item cards and deal 5 to each player, returning any remaining cards to the game box. Number 8. Separate the remaining item cards into separate decks according to their location. Shuffle each deck and place it on its corresponding location card. Number 9. Deal 4 survivor cards to each player. Each player then chooses 2 to keep and returns the others to the deck. Reshuffle the survivor deck. Each player makes one of those 2 survivors her group leader, placing it in the respective space on a reference card. 11. The other survivor is placed in the players following below the player's reference sheet. 12. The corresponding survivor standees for each player's survivors are added to the colony. 13. Separate the remaining standees and tokens, placing them within easy reach of all players. 14. The player whose group leader has the highest influence value receives the first player token and will take the first turn of the game. Little tip: when setting up the game board according to the main objective, use the blue marker to keep track of the morale and the red marker to keep track of rounds. Round order. Dead of Winter is played over a series of rounds. Each round is divided into 2 phases that must be played in order. Number 1, player turn phase. Number 2, colony phase. Player turns phase. During the player's turns phase, resolve the following 3 effects in order. Number 1, reveal crisis. Reveal the top card of the crisis deck. This card's effect will take place during the colony phase if it's not prevented. Crisis cards can be prevented if players contribute enough of the correct type of cards to that crisis. Number 2, roll action dice. At this time, each player removes any action dice remaining in her used and unused action dice pool. Then each player receives 1 action die, plus 1 additional die for each survivor she controls, so players will start the game with 3 action dice. Each player must roll all of her action dice and keep the results in her unused action dice pool for use during her turn. Even though a player receives 1 action die per survivor she controls, the action die does not belong to that survivor, but to that player's group of survivors. A player can spend multiple action die on performing multiple actions with a single survivor. Number 3, player turns. During the player turn phase, each player starting with the first player will take a turn. At the beginning of a player's turn, the player to her right draws a crossroads card, applying its effects to the player taking the turn if at any time during that turn they meet the trigger requirement. On a player's turn, she may perform multiple actions. Once a player has performed all of the actions she wishes, or if she runs out of actions she is able to perform, on her turn, play passes to the player on her left. Play will continue clockwise around the table until each player has taken a turn. Once each player has taken a turn, the player's turn phase is over, and the colony phase begins. Player turn actions. Some actions require spending an action die, and others do not. To spend an action die, a player removes the appropriate die from his unused action die pool and moves it to his used action die pool. Some actions require that the action die be a specific result, from having it rolled during the roll action dice step. Actions that require an action die. Attack. To perform an attack, a player must choose a survivor he controls and spend an action die equal to or higher than the attack value of that survivor. That player may then choose a target for that attack. The target must be a zombie or a survivor that shares a location with the attacking survivor. If a zombie is chosen, kill it and remove it from the game board. Roll for exposure on the survivor that attacked. See rolling for exposure on page 11 for details. See example attacking a zombie on page 9. If a survivor is chosen, roll the spend action dice. If the result is equal to or less than the chosen survivor's attack value, place a wound marker on the chosen survivor and take a card at random from the hand of the player that controls that survivor. See example attacking a survivor on page 9. Note: the exposure die is not rolled when attacking another survivor. This is an example of attacking a zombie. Player 1 controls the survivor Ashley Ross. Ashley is at the school, and player 1 chooses to attack a zombie in that location with Ashley. Ashley has an attack value of 2+. Player 1 spends an action die with a value of 4, which is equal to or higher than her attack value. The zombie is killed and removed from the school, however player 1 must now roll the exposure die. Player 1 rolls a wound on the exposure die, and places 1 wound marker on Ashley's survivor card. Example: attacking a survivor. Ashley Ross is back at the school, and player 1 chooses to have Ashley attack Mike Cho, a survivor that player 2 controls. Ashley has an attack value of 2+. Player 1 spends an action die with a value of 3, which is equal to or higher than her attack value. Player 1 then rolls a spent action die. He rolls a 1, which is equal to or less than Mike's attack value of 2+. Player 2 must place 1 wound marker on Mike Cho's survivor card, and player 1 gets to take a card at random from player 2's hand. Player 1 does not roll the exposure die. That die is not rolled when attacking a survivor. A player may attack multiple times with the same survivor in a single turn. An action die equal to or higher than the attack value of that survivor must be spent each time that survivor attacks. A player cannot have a survivor he controls attack another survivor he controls. A player cannot attack a helpless survivor. Search. The second action that needs a dice is search. A player can search at any location except the colony. To perform a search, a player must choose a survivor he controls and spend an action die equal to or higher than the search value of that survivor. He may then draw 1 card from the item deck of the location that the survivor is on, looking at it but not yet adding it to his hand. He may then choose to either, number 1, add that card to his hand and end his search action, or make noise by placing a noise token on an empty noise space at the location to draw and look at an additional card. He may draw additional cards as long as there is still empty noise spaces for the corresponding noise tokens. When the player has decided he has made enough noise or can no longer make any more noise, he must keep one of the drawn cards, adding it to his hand, and place the rest on the bottom of the item deck. A player may search multiple times for the same survivor in a single turn. An action die equal to or higher than the search value of that survivor must be spent each time that survivor searches. Barricade. To perform a barricade action, a player must choose a survivor he controls and spend an action die of any result to place a barricade token on any empty entrance space at the chosen survivor's location. Clean waste. A player may perform a clean waste action if he controls at least one survivor at the colony. To perform a clean waste action, that player must spend one action die of any result and remove the top 3 cards of the waste pile from the game. Attract. To perform an attract action, a player must choose a survivor he controls and spend an action die of any result to move 2 zombies from any location to any empty entrance spaces at chosen survivor's location. Survivor ability. Some survivor abilities require an action die to be spent. When this is the case, it will be signified by a number in front of the ability's text. The action die spent must meet or exceed that number in order for it to be used. A player may use the same survivor's ability multiple times in a single turn, unless the ability says otherwise. An action die equal to or higher than the ability's number must be spent each time it is used. Actions that do not require an action die. Play a card. As many times as he likes during his turn, a player may play a card from his hand. To play a card, place it on top of the waste pile. When an event item card is played, it is not placed in the waste pile. Instead, remove it from the game. Reminder, for every 10 cards in the waste pile during the check waste step, the colony will lose 1 morale because of the stench. Equip. A card of an equip ability is not placed in the waste pile. Instead, a player may equip it to any survivor. That survivor now has the effect listed in that item card. Once a card is equipped, it cannot be unequipped unless it is being added to a crisis or is being handed off. If a survivor with 1 or more equipped card dies at the colony, the equipped cards are added back to the controlling player's hand. If a survivor with 1 or more equipped card dies at a non-colony location, the equipped cards are shuffled into that location's item deck. A player may add 1 or more cards from his hand and or cards that are equipped to the survivors he controls to the currently revealed crisis card. Cards added to the crisis from a player's hands are added face down so that no other players can see them. Adding cards that match a symbol shown in the prevent area of the crisis card helps to prevent that crisis from happening. Each card added that does not match a symbol helps cause the crisis to happen. Note, some food cards add multiple food tokens to the food supply when they are played. These foods cards still only count as 1 card played into the crisis. Move a survivor. A player may move each survivor he controls once during his turn. A survivor may be moved to any location that has an empty survivor space. After each time a player moves, he must roll for exposure. Note, if the result of rolling for exposure was a bitten, when it is spread, it spreads to a survivor in the location that the moved survivor has moved to. Spend food tokens. A player may spend 1 or more food tokens by removing them from the food supply area on the colony board. That player increases any 1 unused action die he controls by 1 for every food token he spends. Request. During his turn, a player may request 1 or more item cards from other players. Other players may give the requesting player an item card from their hand. If they do, that card must be revealed and immediately played. The requested card cannot be added to the crisis. Hand off. During his turn, a player may have a survivor he controls that has an item equipped, hand that item off to another survivor at the same location. When an item is handed off, it is unequipped from the survivor, and is immediately equipped to the survivor that is being handed to. Note, if the item has a once per round ability, and it has already been used that round, it cannot be used again by handing it off to another survivor. Vote to exile. Once during each of his turns, a player may choose another player to initiate a vote to exile that player. Initiating a vote forces all players simultaneously to cast a vote of yes, thumbs up, or no, thumbs down, to determine whether or not the chosen player is exiled. A player cannot initiate a vote to exile themselves. Remember, all ties are broken by the first player. This includes votes to exile. See the exile section on page 14 for more details. Rolling for exposure. Immediately after a survivor moves to a new location or kills a zombie, the player that controls that survivor must roll for exposure by rolling this die. Each die has an effect that is triggered when that result is rolled. Blank. Nothing happens. Hooray. Wound. The survivor receives 1 wound token. Frostbite. The survivor receives 1 frostbite wound token. This is considered a wound. At the beginning of each of your turns, each survivor you control that has 1 or more frostbite wound tokens on it receives an additional wound token. Bitten. The survivor is killed and the bite effect spreads. Spreading a bite effect. When a survivor is killed as a result of a bitten roll, the bite effect spreads to the survivor with the lowest influence that shared a location with the bitten survivor. Each time a bite effect spreads, the player that controls the survivor it spread to must choose from the following options. Option 1. Kill the survivor that the bite effect spread to. The bite effect stops spreading. Option 2. Roll the exposure die again. On a blank result, that survivor that the bite effect spread to is not killed, and the bite effect stops spreading. On any other result, the survivor that the bite effect spreads to is killed, and the bite effect spreads again. The bite effect will continue to spread until a player either chooses option 1, rolls a blank result after choosing option 2, or there is no more survivors at the location. Remember, when a survivor is killed by any game effect, the colony loses 1 morale. Resolving crossroads cards. At the beginning of each player's turn, the player to her right will draw a crossroad card. That player must keep the crossroads card secret, only revealing it if its trigger happens. The text on that card applies to the player taking the turn. If at any time on the player's turn she meets the requirements of the trigger, all the card's text is read aloud by the player who drew it. Most crossroads cards provide 2 options to choose from. All the text from these options is read aloud. The player the card applies to must then choose one of the options. That option immediately takes effect and the card is removed from the game. If the card does not trigger, place it on the bottom of the crossroads deck. If a player is unable to meet the conditions of an option on the crossroads card, she must choose the other option. Note, some crossroad cards trigger when a player performs an action. This trigger takes place after the action being taken has been resolved. Note, some crossroad effects have you search for a deck for a specific card. After searching a deck, shuffle it. Example, resolving a crisis. During a free player game, the fuel shortage crisis is resolved. None of the free players have been exiled, so a total of 3 points must be obtained to prevent the crisis. 4 cards have been placed onto the crisis contributions. The cards are shuffled and revealed to show cards with 3 fuel symbols and 1 weapon symbol. Each fuel symbol adds 1 to the point total. However, the weapon symbol is not included in the prevent section of the crisis card, and therefore takes a point away from the total points. The final total is 2 points, which is less than the number of non-exiled players. The crisis is not prevented. The colony phase. During the colony phase, resolve the following 7 effects in order. Number 1. Pay food. Remove 1 food token from the food supply for every 2 survivors in the colony, rounded up. Remember, helpless survivor tokens count as survivors for this purpose. Note, survivors at locations other than a colony do not count towards the total number of survivors in the colony. They are considered to be foraging food for themselves, and so do not require food to be paid from the supply. If there are not enough food tokens, do the following in order. Do not remove any food tokens. Add a starvation token to the food supply. Decrease morale by 1 for each starvation token currently in the food supply. Number 2. Check waste. Count the cards in the waste pile. For every 10 cards, rounded down, decrease morale by 1. Number 3. Resolve crisis. Shuffle the cards that were added face down to the crisis during the player's turns phase. Reveal them 1 at a time. Each item card added that has a symbol matching a symbol in the prevent section of the crisis is worth 1 point. Each card that doesn't have a symbol matching a symbol in the prevent section of the crisis subtracts 1 point. After revealing all the cards, if the combined point total is lower than the number of non-exiled players, then immediately resolve the crisis. If the point total equals or exceeds the number of non-exiled players, the crisis is prevented. Additionally, if the point total exceeds the number of non-exiled players by 2 or more, the colony gains 1 morale. After resolving the crisis, remove all cards added to the crisis from the game. Number 4. Add zombies. Add 1 zombie to the colony for every 2 survivors including helper survivors present there, rounded up. Add 1 zombie to each non-colony location for every 1 survivor present at that location. 1 at a time, remove each noise token at a location and roll an action die for each. Add a zombie to that location on each roll of 3 or lower. See adding zombies on the next page for details on adding zombies to the colony. Number 5. Check main objective. Check to see if the goal on the main objective has been achieved. If it has been achieved, the game immediately ends. Number 6. Move round tracker. Move the round tracker down 1 space on the round track. If it is moved onto 0, the game immediately ends. Pass first player token. At the end of each round, any player may initiate a vote to prevent the first player token from being passed to the next player. If the vote passes, the first player token remains with the current first player. Otherwise, the first player passes the first player token to the player on his right. A new round begins starting with the reveal crisis section of the player's turn phase. Adding zombies. Whenever adding zombies, they are added 1 at a time until all zombies that needed to be added have been added. When adding zombies to the colony, always place the first zombie on any empty space in entrance 1, the second zombie on any empty space in entrance 2, the third zombie on any empty space in entrance 3, etc., until all of the zombies that needed to be added have been placed. When adding a 7th zombie, place it on any empty space in entrance 1 again, an 8th zombie on any empty space in entrance 2, etc. If there are no empty entrance spaces in the entrance the zombie would be placed, but there is a barricade token in one of those spaces, destroy that barricade token and remove the zombie that would have been placed. If there are no empty spaces and no barricade tokens, the entrance has been overrun. Remove that zombie and kill the survivor at the colony that has the lowest influence value. If there are only helpless survivors at the colony, kill a helpless survivor. If there are no survivors at the colony, remove the zombie that would have been placed without further effect. Every time a survivor is killed, including a helpless survivor, decrease morale by 1. When adding zombies to non-colony locations, follow all the same rules, except there is only one entrance to place zombies in, so all the zombies are placed in spaces at that entrance. In the rare case that players ever have to add zombies and there are no more zombie standees left, use the zombie tokens included in the game to add additional zombies. Killing zombies. Whenever a zombie is attacked, it is killed. Whenever a zombie is killed by an attack or card effect, that player that controls the survivor that killed the zombie must roll for exposure on that survivor. When killing a zombie at the colony, choose which zombie to kill. It may come from any entrance. A zombie that is killed or otherwise removed from the game is placed back into the pile of unused zombies. Adding survivors. Some game effects will cause a player to add a new survivor to her following. Whenever a survivor is added to the game, its corresponding standee is added to the colony occupant section of the colony board. The player who controls a new survivor may use that survivor during her turn, but does not roll an additional action die for it until the roll action dice step of the player turns phase. If there are no empty survivor spaces remaining at the colony, then players cannot trigger crossroads cards that would add survivors, including helpless survivors, and cannot play item cards that would add survivors. Killing survivors. When zombies overrun a location entrance, a survivor is killed. When a survivor has 3 or more wound tokens, it is killed. When a survivor is bitten, it is killed. Some card effects may kill a survivor. When a survivor is killed, remove its survivor standee from the game board, decrease morale by 1, and remove its survivor card from the game. If that survivor had any cards equipped to it, and that survivor is at the colony, those cards are added to the hand of the player that controlled that survivor. If the survivor is at any other location, those cards are shuffled into that location's item deck. If a player's group leader is killed or otherwise lost, she must choose a survivor from her following and make it her new group leader. If a player's last remaining survivor would be killed or otherwise lost, that player immediately removes from the game all cards in her hand, draws a new survivor card, adds it to the game, and makes that survivor her new group leader. If a helpless survivor is killed by the effects of a card, or as a result of a zombie overrun, where there are only helpless survivors in the location, remove a helpless survivor token and reduce morale by 1. Note, some card effects remove survivors from the game. This is not the same thing as killing a survivor. You do not lose morale when removing a survivor unless the card directs you to. If the players vote in favor of exiling a player, that exiled player must immediately draw 1 exiled secret objective card. This card will adjust his secret objective. The exiled player must move all of the survivors he controls that are in the colony to a non-colony location of his choice. Those survivors follow all the normal rules for movement, except this move does not count as the 1 move survivors are allowed to make during his turn. Some new rules apply to the exiled player. The exiled player cannot add cards to a crisis. When the exiled player is directed to add helpless survivor tokens to the colony, those tokens are not added. If the exiled player plays a survivor item card to add a survivor to the game, it is placed at a non-colony location of his choice rather than at the colony. The exiled player cannot spend food tokens to increase his action die results, but may play food cards to increase an action die result by 1 for each food card played, rather than carrying out the effect listed on the food card. The exiled player cannot vote. The colony does not lose morale when a survivor the exiled player controls is killed. When an exiled player plays a card, instead of placing it in the waste pile, he removes it from the game. Important note. If at any time during the game there are 2 exiled players and neither had a betrayal secret objective, morale immediately drops to 0. Winning and losing the game. When the game ends for any reason, if a player has completed his secret objective, he wins. If he has not, he loses. Some players may win in a game that other players lost. There can be multiple winners. It is also possible for everyone to lose if no one has completed the secret objective when the game ends. The game can end in a variety of ways. If the morale track reaches 0, the game ends immediately. Do not check to see if the main objective has been completed. If the round track reaches 0, the game ends immediately. Do not check to see if the main objective is completed. And the third way that it can end is if the main objective is completed. Voting. During the game, players may be given the option to vote with a thumbs up or down, either because a player initiated a vote to exile or because a crossroads card called for a vote to be cast. Players may take time to deliberate before casting their vote. Once players are ready to vote, count down from 3, with every player simultaneously casting his vote on 0. Card text. When a card effect contradicts the rulebook, the card effects take precedence. If 2 game effects would ever seem to trigger simultaneously, the first player decides in which order they will resolve. An item card cannot be played to interrupt an effect currently taking place. For example, a medicine card cannot be played to prevent a wound. It can only be played after receiving a wound, so if a survivor receives their 3rd wound, they cannot be saved by playing a medicine card. They will be killed. Random locations. Cards in a long night may direct you to choose a random location. In order to choose a random location, roll a 6-sided die. The location whose number matches the die result is chosen. The colony has no location number, and some of the locations have a number above 6, thus some locations are never chosen randomly. Searching a deck. Anytime a game effect allows a player to search a location's entire item deck, that player should shuffle the deck afterwards. Roll a die. Many cards instruct you to roll a die to determine the result of an effect. Whenever an effect instructs you to roll a die, take an action die not in use by any player and roll that die. After you have determined the results of the effect, return it to the pile of action dice not in use. Role-playing, secret objectives, and game balance. In Dead of Winter, each player takes on a role of a survivor in the zombie apocalypse. That survivor leads a group of other like-minded survivors. That group of survivors is part of a larger colony of survivors who are all trying to live through a harsh winter in a broken world. Each player starts the game with a secret objective. That secret objective represents the psychological bearing or secret aspirations of that player and her following. Most players are driven to see the colony succeed, but they also have other compulsions that run so deep that they too must be achieved. Betrayal secret objectives represent a survivor who is actively working against the colony. An exiled secret objective represents the reaction of that group of survivors to being exiled. Some secret objectives may be more difficult to complete than others. Gameplay variants. Co-op variant. Players may choose to play the game cooperatively. Use the hardcore side of the main objectives card and do not assign secret objectives. Each player's only objective is to complete the main objective. Players cannot vote to exile a player. During setup, remove from the game every card showing the non-co-op symbol on the bottom right corner of the card. 2-player variant. Follow the same rules as the co-op variant. When setting up, each player receives 7 starting item cards instead of 5, and receives 4 survivors and keeps 3 of them instead of keeping only 2. Betrayer variant. During the setup, players may choose to add 1 non-betrayal secret objective per player rather than 2, greatly increasing the odds of a betrayer. Hardcore variant. Instead of playing with the standard side of the main objective, players may choose to play the normal game but use the hardcore side of the main objective for a greater challenge. Player elimination variant. Players may choose to play the game with a player elimination variant. If the player's last remaining survivor would be killed or otherwise lost, remove from the game all cards in their hand. That player is out of the game. The Long Night rules. Dead of Winter The Long Night uses all the same rules as the Dead of Winter base set, with slight modifications and added twists. Some rules are used every time you play The Long Night. In addition, free modules are included which can be optionally added to the game. Each module comes with its own additional rules and components. Preparing for The Long Night. Before setting up a game of Dead of Winter The Long Night, decide which modules you want to use. You may add the free modules in any combination, or none of them. Start by gathering all the cards marked with the moon icon on the lower right of the card. Then, for each module being used, add in the cards marked with the icon for that module. All cards and components from the Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game base set, may be used with The Long Night as desired. Whenever search decks are combined from more than one Dead of Winter product, shuffle each location deck and deal out 20 cards face down to form a search deck for that location. Remove the undealt cards from the game. Important note, combining cards in this way may make the game more or less difficult. Players may choose to pick cards to add or remove to create a personal experience. Some item cards in The Long Night are multi-use. If a multi-use token has an effect related to a module you are not using this game, that item can only be used for its other effect. If you are playing without the Bandits module, ignore the Bandit portion of Crisis cards. New rules for every game. The following rules apply to The Long Night regardless of whether any modules are used. First player vote. At the end of each round, any player may initiate a vote to prevent the first player token from being passed to the next player. If the vote passes, the first player token remains with the current first player. Random locations. Cards in The Long Night may direct you to choose a random location. Roll a 6-sided die. The location whose number matches the die result is chosen. The colony has no location number, and some of those locations have a number above 6. Thus, some locations are never chosen randomly. The Graveyard. The Graveyard looks like a location, but is really just a place to organize survivor cards and standees for survivors who have died. It has no gameplay effect other than possible Crossroads cards. Despair. A survivor may gain despair due to Crossroads cards, Crisis cards, or other game effects. Despair is added to a survivor by placing a despair token on a survivor's card for each despair gained. Despair tokens count as normal wounds for all intents and purposes, except that they cannot be removed by any effect that removes wounds of any kind. Despair tokens may only be removed by effects that specifically remove despair. Unruly helpless survivors. Helpless survivors may become or start out unruly due to Crossroads cards, Crisis cards, or other game effects. Show that a helpless survivor is unruly by placing that helpless survivor token with the unruly side facing up. Unruly helpless survivors count as 2 helpless survivors, when counting survivors during the pay food and add zombie steps of the colony phase. The active player may flip an unruly survivor token to its normal helpless survivor side by placing a medicine card in the waste pile without using its effect. Explosive traps. Some game effects may result in an explosive trap token being placed in an entrance space. Explosive traps work exactly like barricades, except that when the explosive trap is destroyed due to attempting to add a zombie to its space, in addition to removing the token, also remove all zombies already at that entrance. Important note, there are special scenarios introduced starting on page 20 that will teach you the rules to the Long Night modules as you play without having to read through the new rules. These modules can be left out or added to the game as desired. Components for each module are marked with that module's icon. When setting up a game, for each included module, follow the instructions below. The Improvements module. Improvements can be built to improve life at the colony. To set up the Improvements module, number 1, add the Crisis, Survivor, Crossroads and Objective cards marked with the hammer icon to their respective decks. At the start of the game, shuffle the Improvements deck and draw 4 improvement cards, placing them in a row face up near the colony. During the game, items and other game effects will allow players to place advancement tokens on improvements. If at any time an improvement has advancement tokens equal to or greater than the number indicated on the card, that improvement's ongoing effects are now active. Place the improvement card or its corresponding improvement token, whichever you prefer, in the center of the colony blueprint. The Bandits module. Bandits are non-zombie characters that the players don't control. Bandits appear at non-colony locations and take up survivor spaces when they are placed. To set up the Bandits module, number 1, add the Crisis, Survivor, Crossroads and Objective cards marked with the Bandit icon to their respective decks. Number 2, add the Bandits hideout location to the play area. The Bandits hideout does not have a search deck. Number 3, place the Bandit standees near the Bandits hideout. Bandits affect the game in the following ways. Placing Bandits. When revealing a new Crisis card during the reveal step of the player's turn phase, place any bandits as instructed on the Bandit placement section of the Crisis card. When placing a bandit at a location, if there are no available survivor spaces, do not place that bandit. Note, if you would like to use Crisis cards from the original Dead of Winter that do have bandit placement listed on them, you may place 2 bandits at random locations when a Crisis card without them is revealed. You may also not place bandits during that turn for easier play. Attacking a bandit. When performing an attack action with a survivor, you may choose a bandit that shares a location with that survivor as the target of the attack. Follow the same rules for attacking a bandit as for attacking a survivor with an attack value of 4, and remove the bandit if the attack is successful. Adding zombies. Each bandit counts as a survivor for the purpose of adding zombies during the add zombies step of the colony phase. When a colony is overrun, if there are no survivors at that location, remove all bandits from that location. Bandit scavenge. After resolving the add zombies step of the colony phase, each bandit scavenges for resources. For each active bandit, draw 1 card from the search deck at that bandit's location and place it face up on the bandit's hideout. Bandit's hideout. The bandit's hideout is a special location. To interact with the bandit's hideout, follow the instructions on the bandit's hideout location card. Becoming leader of the bandits. An exiled player who was not the betrayer becomes the leader of the bandits. In addition to other rules related to the exiled players, whenever bandits are placed during the reveal crisis step of the player's turn phase, the exiled players decide where to place those bandits. The Raxon module. Raxon is a new location with special rules that players can add to the game. To set up the Raxon module, number 1, add the Crisis, Survivor, Crossroads and Objective cards marked with the Skull and Crossbones icon to their respective decks. Number 2, add the Raxon location card to the play area and set up its search deck normally. Number 3, shuffle the Raxon Experiments deck and place it on the Raxon location with the Raxon audio log side face up. Players may read the audio logs at the top card of the Raxon Experiments deck at any time. Take the Raxon side effect deck and place it near the Raxon location card. The Raxon side effect deck does not need to be shuffled, and players may look through it at any time. Searching at Raxon. Anytime you perform a search in Raxon, after the search, roll for exposure for the survivor who performed the search. Pill effect items. Pill items in the Raxon search deck contain events which may equip a card from the Raxon side effect deck to a survivor. To use a pill item, number 1, choose a survivor you control to take the pill. Number 2, roll a die and follow the card's instructions. Number 3, if you're instructed to equip a side effect card, search the Raxon side effect deck and equip it to the chosen survivor. Raxon side effect cards cannot be unequipped. The containment code. Terrifying experiments are pouring out of the Raxon facility each round unless the players contain them. During a player's turn, while he controls a survivor at Raxon, he may place an action die from his unused die pool on the Raxon location. At the beginning of the colony phase, if there are 2 action dice on the Raxon location, matching the containment code shown on the audio log side of the top card of Raxan Experiment deck. All players vote with a thumbs up or thumbs down, with the most popular option taking place. Thumbs up option: discard the top Raxan Experiment card without triggering its placement effect. Thumbs down option: the first player chooses a single location, including the colony. During the add zombies step of the colony phase, reduce the number of zombies placed at that location by 3. Containment code failure or thumbs down. At the beginning of the colony phase, if there are not 2 action dice on the Raxan location matching the containment code, or if the thumbs down option was chosen above, place the zombies listed on the audio log side of the top card of the Raxan Experiments deck using the matching standees. When more than 1 zombie is placed by the card, roll for each zombie placement one at a time. When placing a special zombie standee, if there are no entrance space available, trigger explosive traps, remove barricades, or trigger an overrun as usual, and do not place the zombie as usual, discarding the equipment card instead. After 1 or more special zombies are placed, flip the experiment card to the encounter side and place it near the colony so that all players can see it. Special zombies can only be killed with a regular attack. Other game effects such as item and character abilities that do not involve an attack, or explosive traps that would normally kill a zombie, do not affect special zombies. Special zombies cannot be moved by any game effect, except for those listed on their encounter cards. When performing an attack, you must target a special zombie before you may target a standard zombie, survivor, or bandit if the survivor you are attacking with shares a location with a special zombie. When a survivor attacks a special zombie, roll for exposure as normal, unless a character ability, equipped item, or other effect prevents the survivor from rolling for exposure when attacking. Then, if the survivor is still alive, roll a die and apply the corresponding effect of the special zombie encounter card. If the special zombie is removed and there are no more special zombies of this type in play, discard this encounter card. The Long Night Special Scenarios. These scenarios and their related main objective cards are intended to introduce the rules and background story for the Raxan and Bandits module that come with the Long Night. We recommend using each of these objectives as your starting point for experiencing the modules of the Long Night. To set up any of these scenarios, follow the setup instructions for the scenario. You do not need to read all of the rules for a module before you start one of these scenarios. The scenario will instruct you when you need the module's rules. Board Game Reader. Listen, learn, play.